Before the name America was ever whispered across distant oceans, before sails cut through salt wind to claim what was never theirs, before Columbus redrew the story of an entire world, there was a land, vast, sacred, wild, and ancient. A land not waiting to be discovered, but already alive with memory and song. This was not an empty continent. It was full of people, full of purpose, full of harmony. A world not forgotten by time, but buried under the silence of conquest. A world we must now remember. This was the Americas before Columbus. This was the forgotten Eden. In the beating heart of the Great Plains, herds of bison thundered across the land. Their hooves cracked the soil, their shadows blanketed the hills, and their presence shaped everything. These mighty beasts were more than meat. They were the axis of entire cultures. The Lakota, Cheyenne, and Arapaho moved with the herds, following their migration as faithfully as the sun. When a bison was taken, nothing was wasted. Its hide became shelter. Its bones became tools. Its sinew, bowstring. Its soul, sacred. Great gatherings were held after a hunt. Fires burned through the night as elders spoke to the stars, thanking the animal spirit. The children listened in silence. For to take life was never casual. It was a spiritual contract. Further north, winters came like a slow-breathing predator. The sky turned white. The rivers froze in place. Snow piled against mountains like ancient burial mounds. Yet here, too, people thrived. The Inuit, Yupik, and Athabascan peoples built worlds from ice and silence. Igloos stood firm against screaming winds. Furs kept newborns warm. Fires flickered in stone lamps filled with whale fat, casting shadows that danced like spirits. In these frozen landscapes, survival was not a battle. It was a ritual. Knowledge passed from mouth to ear. How to hunt seals, read snowdrifts, track caribou across endless white. They didn't fear the cold. They mastered it. Deep in the forests of the east, great trees stretched to the sky like pillars in a living cathedral. In the shadows of these ancient woods, people lived in longhouses, wooden structures that sheltered entire clans. The Iroquois, Huron, and Shawnee built societies that prized cooperation over conquest. Their homes pulsed with firelight, laughter, cooking smoke, and whispered wisdom. In the evenings, stories were told in 1,000 native tongues. Stories of sky women and turtle islands, of trickster gods and ancestor spirits. Children fell asleep to myths older than pyramids. Marriages were honored with feasts, dances, and tobacco offerings to the Creator. The joining of two souls was not a personal event. It was the weaving of two family tapestries. In the deserts of the Southwest, stone met spirit. The Pueblo peoples carved homes into canyon walls, their adobe dwellings blending into the cliffs like they'd always belonged. Some communities lived in caves that opened into the sky like ancient amphitheaters. These were not primitive huts. They were masterworks of architecture, aligned with solstices and equinoxes. Painted hands, spirals, and animal symbols still mark the walls of these sacred homes. The people prayed to rain, danced in feathers and bells, and gathered in kivas, underground chambers of song, sacrifice, and storytelling. They planted corn with sticks and songs. They watched the moon, tracked the stars, and sang to the sun. The jungles of the south were alive with music. The Maya built towering stone cities like Palenque, Tikal, and Copan, lost in vines and humming with the voices of parrots, monkeys, and insects. These were cities of gods and kings. Temples rose to the heavens, their staircases carved with serpents and stars. The Maya measured time in cycles that spanned thousands of years. They played the sacred ball game in stone courts, where warriors used only hips and shoulders to move a heavy rubber ball. This was no sport, it was myth in motion, a reenactment of creation and destruction, played for honor and sometimes paid in blood. Further west, the Aztecs built Tenochtitlan, an island city floating on a lake, with canals instead of streets and gardens floating on water. Over 200,000 people lived there, surrounded by markets, pyramids, and sacred fire. When a child was born, their name was whispered to the gods in Nahuatl. When someone died, their body was wrapped in white cloth and burned with corn, jade, and obsidian. Rituals were not reserved for priests. They were life itself. Every sunrise began with incense. Every battle ended in prayer. Every death was a doorway. In the far forests of the Pacific Northwest, people carved stories into cedar. Totem poles stood like wooden scrolls, telling the histories of clans through the faces of bears, ravens, wolves, and whales. Massive longhouses, strong as ships, housed generations under a single roof. Ceremonial feasts called potlatches were held to give, not take. The more you gave away, the richer you became. Wealth was measured not in gold, but in generosity. The rivers ran full of salmon, and the people thanked them each year with dances, offerings, and painted stones dropped into the current. The weather was not background, it was a living force. In the Great Plains, lightning split the sky in perfect lines. Storms rolled across the grasslands like cavalry. People saw these storms as beings, feathered thunderbirds with wings of rain and talons of wind. When the clouds gathered, the drums answered them. Rain was not feared, it was called. In the jungles, the heavens opened in daily rhythms. The land turned to mist. The rivers rose and life exploded from the soil. In the mountains, snow fell in silence, wrapping the land in a white ritual of rest. The seasons weren't obstacles. They were teachers, cycles to honor, patterns to follow, spirits to respect. Language was a living ocean. The people of the Americas spoke over 1,000 different tongues, some sharp and guttural, others smooth and poetic. In many, the word for land was the same as mother. In others, there was no word for own, only words for share. Language wasn't just how people spoke, it was how they remembered. Elders could recite hundreds of years of history from memory. Stories were braided into songs, into dance, into the tattoos on skin and carvings on wood. Some languages had specific words for a river in spring or the color of a hawk's wing at dusk. Every word carried a world. Gatherings were the heartbeat of the land. Tribes met to trade obsidian, turquoise, tobacco, feathers, and stories. Great councils were held beneath trees or stars. Dances lasted for days. Marriages were arranged between clans with shared dreams. Drums called people together. Fires kept the night warm. Food was passed in circles. Children learned by watching. The elderly were not abandoned. They were revered. A grandmother's story was as sacred as a warrior's scar. In these gatherings, alliances were made, disputes were settled, songs were born, and in the wild, the animals watched. The jaguar moved like a god through jungle shadows. The eagle soared above as messenger to the sky realm. Wolves hunted in packs, not just for food, but for balance. The moose drank from still lakes that reflected clouds and mountains. Otters slid through rivers like laughter made flesh. The land wasn't just shared with animals, it was taught by them. In many tribes, children were given animal names to shape their future. The bear might be strong, the fox clever, the owl wise, the salmon persistent. The rivers, they were lifelines. The Mississippi, Ohio, Columbia, Colorado, and Rio Grande, they carried not just water, but stories. Villages sprang up along their banks. Canoes glided from one end of the world to the other. Women washed clothes while singing to the current. Men fished with woven nets and bone hooks. Children played in shallows, and when people died, they were often returned to the river. Ashes scattered, bones buried in islands, so their spirits could keep flowing, carried by the veins of the earth. This was not a silent world. It was a symphony. The rustle of pine, the crack of ice, the roar of bison, the cry of hawks, the hush of snow, the chant of firelight, the boom of drums, the laughter of children, the whisper of wind through feathers. This was the world before Columbus. It was not savage. It was not empty. It was not forgotten. It was alive. It was wise. It was sacred. We did not discover it. We disrupted it. But the land remembers. The rivers remember. The stars remember. And somewhere inside us, we remember too. This was the forgotten Eden. And now, it is time to remember.